The Story of the Unlucky Days by Robert Nisbet Bain. At the end of a village on the verge of the steppe dwelled two brothers, one rich and the other poor. One day, the poor brother came to the rich brother's house and sat down at his table. But the rich brother drove him away and said, "How dare you sit at my table? Be off. Your proper place is in the fields to scare away the crows." So the poor brother went into the fields to scare away the crows. The crows all flew away when they saw him, but among them was a raven that flew back again and said to him, "Oh man, in this village you will never be able to live, for here there is neither luck nor happiness for you. But go into another village, and you shall do well." Then the man went home, called together his wife and children, packed up the few old clothes that still remained in his wardrobe, and went on to the next village, carrying his water-skin on his shoulders. On and on they tramped along the road, but the unlucky days clung on to him and said,
"Why do you not take us with you? We will never leave you, for you are ours."
So they went on with him till they came to a river, and the man, who was thirsty, went down to the water's edge for a drink. He opened his water-skin, persuaded the unlucky days to get into it, tied it fast again, and buried it on the bank close by the river. Then he and his family went on farther. They went on and on until they came to another village, and at the very end of it was an empty hut. The people who had lived there had died of hunger. There, the whole family settled down. One day, they were all sitting down there when they heard something in the mountain crying, "Catch hold! Catch hold! Catch hold!" The man went at once into his stable, took down the bit and reins that remained to him, and climbed up into the mountain. He looked all about him as he went, and at last he saw, sitting down, an old goat with two large horns. It was the devil himself, but of course he didn't know that. So he made a lasso of the reins, threw them round the old goat, and began to drag it gently down the mountainside. He dragged it all the way up the ladder of his barn, when the goat disappeared, but showers and showers of money came tumbling through the ceiling. He collected them all together, and they filled two large coffers. Then the poor man made the most of his money, and in no very long time he was well-to-do. Then he sent some of his people to his rich brother, and invited him to come live with him. The rich brother pondered the matter over. "Maybe he has nothing to eat," thought he, "and that is why he sends for me." So he had his cooks bake a good store of fat pancakes, and set out accordingly. On the way, he heard that his brother had grown rich, and the farther he went, the more he heard of his brother's wealth. Then he regretted that he had brought all the pancakes with him, so he threw them away into the ditch. At last he came to his brother's house, and his brother showed him first one of the coffers full of money, and then the other. Then envy seized upon the rich brother, and he grew quite green in the face. But his brother said to him, "Look now, I have buried a lot more money in a water-skin hard by the river. You may dig it up and keep it if you like, for I have lots of my own here." The rich brother did not wait to be told twice. Off he went to the river and began digging up the water-skin straight away. He unfastened it with greedy, trembling hands. But he had no sooner opened it than the unlucky days all popped out and clung on to him.
"You are ours,"
said they. He went home, and when he got there, he found that all his wealth was consumed, and a heap of ashes stood where his house had been. So he went and lived in the place where his brother had lived, and the unlucky days lived with him ever afterward. There was once upon a time a youth called Unlucky Dan. Wherever he went, and whatever he did, and with whomsoever he served, nothing came of it. All his labor was like spilt water, and he got no good from it. One day he took service with the new master. "I'll serve you a whole year," said he, "for a piece of land on which to grow some wheat." His master agreed, and he entered into his service. And at the same time he sowed his piece of wheat land. His wheat shot up rapidly. When his master's wheat was still in the stalk, his was already in the ear. And when his master's wheat was in the ear, his own wheat was already ripe. I'll reap it tomorrow, thought he. The same night a cloud arose, the hail poured down, and destroyed his wheat altogether. Daniel fell a-weeping. I'll go serve another master, he cried. Perhaps God will then prosper me. So he went to another master. I'll serve you for a whole year, said he, if you will give me that wild colt. So he stopped and served him, and by the end of the year he trained the wild colt so well that he had made a carriage horse out of it. Oh, thought he, I shall take away something with me this time. That same night the wolves broke into the stables and tore the horse to pieces. Daniel fell a-weeping. I'll go to another master, said he. Perhaps I shall be luckier there. So he went to a third master, and on this master's land lay a large stone. Where it came from, no one knew, and it was so heavy that no one could move it, though they tried for ages. I'll serve you a year, said he, for that stone. The master agreed, and he entered his service. Then a change came over the stone, and several flowers began to grow upon it. On one side they were red, on the second side silver, and on the third side golden. Oh, thought Daniel, that stone at any rate will soon be mine. Nobody can move it. But the next morning a thunderbolt descended and struck the stone, and splintered it to atoms. Then Daniel fell a-weeping, and lamented that God had given him nothing, though he had served for so many years. But the people said to him, Listen now, you that are so unlucky. Why do you not go to the Tsar? He is the father of us all, and will therefore certainly take care of you. So he listened to them and went, and the Tsar gave him a place at his court. One day the Tsar said to him, I marvel that you are so unlucky, for do whatsoever you will, you are none the better for it. I must repay you for all your labors. Then he took and filled 3 barrels, the first with gold, and the second with coal, and the third with sand, and said to Daniel, Look now, if you can pick the one that is filled with gold, you shall be a Tsar. If you choose the one that is filled with coal, you shall be a blacksmith. But if you pick the one that is full of sand, why, then you are indeed hopelessly unlucky, and out of my tsardom you must go straight away. Yet I will give you a horse and armor to take along with you. So Daniel was brought to the place where the 3 barrels were, and he went about them and lifted them one after the other. This one is full of gold, said he. They broke it open, and it was full of sand. Well, said the Tsar, I see that you are hopelessly unlucky. Depart from my tsardom, for I have no need at all for such as you. Then he gave him a charger and armor, and the full equipment of a Cossack, and sent him away. He went on for a whole day. He went on for a second day, and there was nothing to eat, either for his horse or himself. He went on for a third day, and in the distance he saw a stable. That will do for my horse, at any rate, thought he, even if it is no good to me. So he went up to it, and immediately it burst into flames. Daniel began to weep when he heard a voice crying piteously, Save me! Save me! I am burning! How can I save you, he cried, when I myself cannot draw near? Oh, give me your weapon, cried the voice, and I'll seize hold of it, and then you can pull me out. So he stretched forth his weapon and drew forth a goodly serpent, such as only known of in old folk songs. And she said to him, Since you have drawn me out, you must also take me home. How shall I carry you? Asked he. Carry me on your horse, and in whatsoever direction I turn my head, and his, go that way. So he took her upon his horse, and they went on, till they came to a court so splendid that it was delightful to look at. Then she glided down from his charger and said, Wait here, and I'll soon be with you again. And with that she wriggled under the gate. He stood there, and stood, and waited, till he wept from sheer weariness. But at last she came out again in the shape of a lovely damsel in gorgeous raiment, and opened the gate for him. Lead in your horse, said she, and eat and rest awhile. So they went into the courtyard, and in the midst of it stood 2 springs. The lady drew out of one of these springs a little glass of water, and strewing a handful of oats beside it, said, Fasten up your horse here. What? Thought he. For these 3 days we have had naught to eat or drink, and now she mocks us with a handful of oats." Then they went together to the guest chamber, and she gave him there a little glass of water and a small piece of wheaten bread. "Why, what is this for a hungry man like me?" thought he. But when he chanced to glance through the window, he saw that the whole courtyard was full of oats and water, and that his horse had already eaten its fill. Then he nibbled his little piece of wheaten bread and sipped his water, and his hunger was immediately satisfied. "Well," said the lady, "have you eaten your fill?" "That I have," he replied. "Then lie down and rest a while," said she. And the next morning when he rose up, she said to him, "Give me your horse, your armor, and your raiment, and I'll give you mine in exchange." Then she gave him her shift and her weapon, and said, "This sword is of such a sort that if you do but wave it, all men will fall down before you. And as for this shift, once you have it on, no one will be able to seize you. And now, go on your way till you come to an inn, and there they will tell you that the Tsar of the land is seeking warriors. Go and offer yourself to him, and you shall marry his daughter, but don't tell her the truth for 7 years." Then they took leave of each other, and he departed. He came to the inn, and there they asked him where he came from. And when they knew that he came from a strange land, they said to him, "A strange people have attacked our Tsar, and he cannot defend himself, for a mighty warrior has conquered his tsardom and carried off his daughter, and worries him to death." "Show me the way to your Tsar," said Daniel. Then they showed him, and he went. When he came to the Tsar, he said to him, "I will subdue this strange land for you. All I need is a couple of Cossacks, but I must be able to pick them myself." Then the heralds went through the tsardom till they had found these 2 Cossacks, and Daniel went forth with them into the endless steppes. And there he bade them lie down and sleep while he kept watch. And while they slept, the army of the strange country came upon them, and cried to Daniel to turn back if he would escape destruction. And they began to fire with their guns and cannons, and they fired so many bullets that the bodies of the 2 Cossacks were quite covered by them. Then Daniel waved his sword, and only those whom his blows did not reach escaped alive. So he vanquished them all, and conquered that strange land, and came back and married the Tsar's daughter, and they lived happily together. But counselors from the strange land whispered dark sayings in the ears of the Tsarina. "Who is this fellow that you have taken for your husband? Who is he, and where does he come from? Find out for us wherein lies his strength, so that we may destroy him, and take you away." Then she began asking him, and he said to her, "Look now, all my strength is in these gloves." Then she waited till he was asleep, and drew them off, and gave them to the people from the strange land. And the next day he went hunting, and the evil counselors surrounded and shot at him with their darts, and beat him with the gloves, but it was all in vain. Then he waved his sword, and whomsoever he struck fell to the ground, and he clapped them all in prison. But his wife caressed and wheedled him again, and said, "But tell me, where does your strength come from?" "My strength, darling," said he, "lies in my boots." Then she drew off his boots while he slept, and gave them to his enemies, and they fell upon him once again as he went out. But again he waved his sword, and as many as he struck fell to the ground, and he put them all in prison. Then his wife wheedled and caressed him at the 3rd time. "But tell me, darling," said she, "where does your strength come from?" By then he was wearied with her beseeching, and said to her, "My strength lies in this sword of mine, and in my shirt, and so long as I have this shirt on, nobody can touch me." Then she smiled and told him, "You should take a bath, my darling, and wash yourself well. My father always did so." So he let himself be persuaded, and no sooner had he undressed than she changed all his clothes for others, and gave his sword and his shirt to his enemies. Then he came out of the bath, and immediately they fell upon him, cut him to pieces, put him in a sack, placed him on his horse, and let the horse go where it would. So the horse went on, and wandered farther and farther, till it came to the old place where he had stayed with the serpent lady. And when his benefactress saw him, she said, "Why, if poor unlucky Daniel hasn't fallen into a scrape again." Immediately she took him out of the sack, and fitted his pieces together, and washed them clean, and took healing water from one of the springs, and living water from the other, and sprinkled him all over. And he stood there sound and strong again. Now didn't I tell you not to tell your wife the truth for 7 years, and you wouldn't listen?" He stood there and never spoke a word. "Well now, rest a while," she continued, "for you do need it, and then I'll give you something else." So the next day she gave him the chain and said to him, "Listen, go to that inn where you went before, and early in the morning, while you are taking a bath, tell the innkeeper to beat you with all his might on the back with this chain, and then go back to your wife, but don't tell her a word of what has happened." So he went to this same inn and passed the night there, and the next morning he called the innkeeper and said to him, "Look now, the first time I dip my head in the water, beat me about the back with this chain as hard as you can." So the innkeeper waited till he had ducked his head under the water, and then he thrashed him with the chain, whereupon he turned into a horse so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. The innkeeper was so glad. "So I've got rid of one guest, only to get another," thought he. He lost no time in taking the horse to the fair, and offered it for sale, and among those who saw it was the Tsar himself. "What do you ask for it?" said the Tsar. "I ask 5,000 rubles." Then the Tsar counted down the money and took the horse away. When he got to his court, he made a great to-do about his beautiful horse, and cried to his daughter, "Come and see, dear little heart, what a fine horse I have bought." Then she came forth to look at it, but the moment she saw it, she cried, "That horse will be my ruin. You must kill it on the spot." "No, dear little heart, how can I do such a thing?" said the Tsar. "Slay it you must, and slay it you shall," cried the Tsarina. So they sent for a knife and began sharpening it, when one of the maidens of the court took pity on the horse, and cried, "Oh, my good, my darling horse, so lovely as you are, and yet to be killed." But the horse neighed and went to her and said, "Look now, take the first drop of blood which flows from me, and bury it in the garden." Then they slew the horse, but the maiden did as she was told, and took the drop of blood and buried it in the garden. And from this drop of blood there sprang up a cherry tree, and its first leaf was golden, and its second leaf was of richer color still, and its third leaf was yet another color, and every leaf upon it was different to the others. One day the Tsar went out walking in his garden, and when he saw this cherry tree, he fell in love with it, and praised it to his daughter. "Look," said he, "what a beauteous cherry tree we have in our garden. Where did it come from?" But the moment the Tsarina saw it, she cried, "That tree will be my ruin. You must cut it down." "No," said he, "how can I cut down the fairest ornament of my garden?" "Down it must come, and down it shall come," replied the Tsarina. Then they sent for an axe and made ready to cut it down. But the damsel came running up and said, "Oh, darling little cherry tree, darling little cherry tree, so fair you are? From a horse have you sprung, and now they will chop you down, and you have only lived a day." "Never mind," said the cherry tree. "Take the first chip that falls from me and throw it into the water." Then they cut down the cherry tree, but the girl did as she was told, and threw the first chip from the cherry tree into the water, and out of it swam a drake so beautiful that it was a delight to look upon it. Then the Tsar went hunting and saw it swimming in the water, and it was so close that he could touch it with his hand. The Tsar took off his clothes and plunged into the water after it, and it enticed him farther and farther away from the shore. Then the drake swam toward the spot where the Tsar had left his clothes, and when it came up to them, it changed into a man and put them on. And behold, the man was Daniel. Then he called to the Tsar, "Swim hither, swim hither!" The Tsar swam up, but when he came to the shore, Daniel met and killed him. And after that he went back to the court in the Tsar's clothes. All the courtiers hailed him as the Tsar, but he said, "Where is that damsel who was here just now?" They brought her instantly before him. "Well," said he to her, "you have been a second mother to me, and now you shall be my second wife." So he lived with her and was happy, but he caused his first wife to be tied to the tails of wild horses and torn to pieces in the endless steppes.